Hi, I'm Greg Ulan with Reynolds & Reynolds, and this is Connected. I'm really excited about this conversation. I feel like it's been a long time coming, a returning guest, but it's been a couple years. I get to sit down with Colin Carrasquillo from Nielsen Automotive Group. He's the digital marketing manager there. Nielsen's a big group in New Jersey, 14 stores currently, continuing to grow. So, Colin, thanks so much for joining me.
Greg, hello. It's been long overdue. I think it was NADA a few years ago. Unfortunately, the team didn't get to make it out to this past NADA with the crazy weather that happened, the once in a lifetime storm, I guess you could call it, down in New Orleans. But it's great to be with you today and talking about some really great stuff on Connected. So thank you.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. I love. I always love your energy, right? And I feel like I was getting all excited for this conversation just because I knew that it was going to be high energy. I had to amp myself up. Had an extra cup of coffee this morning, so I'm ready to go. But no, Colin, you do a lot of content, and that's part of your job, obviously. But even outside of that, you've been on Connected before. I know you've been on with Alana Shabte at Full Path on her podcast, Inside Auto. You even did your own podcast. You had a little stint there with a few episodes, maybe 25 or something, called Experimenting. Is that right?
Experimarketing, but yes.
Experimarketing. Okay.
Listen, it's been a little while, but maybe it's coming back soon. Stay tuned.
All right. I love it. And you've been doing stuff with CBT as well, right? Marketing Matters.
Yes. So CBT News, I mean, what a wonderful platform, first and foremost. I put it up there right with you guys. And the fact of the matter is Marketing Matters has been a great little show that we've been able to put together with them to educate the dealer community. And same thing there. Season 2, if you want to call it that, coming soon. So it's just about gathering all of the wonderful ideas and content and creators and people with great ideas out there to put on the show. So it's been really, really wonderful.
That's great. Were you able to get down there to their studio in Atlanta? It looked like you recorded in their studio.
So yes, the first season, if you will, was a couple days shoot, and I was down there. I brought all my different change of clothes, so it didn't look like I was wearing the same thing for the whole season. I promise I change and shower and all that. But the fact of the matter is, I was down in the studio, which was really, really cool to see the operation and what Jim and his wife Bridget have built down there. It's just not CBT News. They have that incredible studio there, but then they also have a shared kind of working space, like a co-op working space for startup businesses and small businesses down there. And I mean, it's just really, really unbelievable what they've been able to put together. So definitely people that I would try to emulate, definitely at some point in life, depending on where the industry and my career, ends up going. But yes, I was fortunate enough to be down there and spend a few days filming. So it was really, really fun.
That's excellent. No, you did a great job with it. So looking forward to seeing what you come up with for season 2.
Yeah, me too.
But hey, I wanted to dive in. You are somebody that has a great voice in the industry. I would consider you a marketing expert, a digital marketing expert, certainly in our automotive space. So I wanted to dive in. Something that's been really top of mind for me lately is how do you really measure success, right? Mm-hmm. And thinking about it from a marketing perspective, there's a lot of ways that you can look at it. Sometimes we get bucketed into this, right? How many leads did we generate, or how much traffic did we create? And those are important metrics. But then you have the flip side of, okay, how well did those leads convert, right? At the end of the day, if our salespeople aren't getting true at bats, and frankly, those at bats aren't closing, does it even matter, right? So I'm kind of curious your perspective to start the conversation with, how do you measure success with what you and your team do from a marketing perspective?
Great question. So first and foremost, I do want to thank you for the kind words. It started really as me just being a guy that I thought, hey, if I can teach someone something, right? They often say, I guess, if you can teach someone something, it shows sign of true mastery, right? And I'm not saying I am a master by any means. I'll tell you that, one of the greatest pieces of advice I received earlier on in my career was that there's always a brighter, redder, faster Ferrari. Now you can kind of take that for really what it is. And the fact of the matter is that there always is someone, something out there that can do, better than you. And it's not about, hey, getting defeated when you learn that. It's about, all right, how am I going to surround myself, right, with those people that are better performers and always kind of be a forever learner and constantly learning. That's what really motivated kind of this whole content journey, if you will, because, it's a very unique position and perspective for me. I am not a vendor partner. I don't have anything to sell. Really, the only thing I have to sell is myself, right? And the fact
We got
that
to sell cars.
right, and cars, but it's myself and what the successes and I guess trials and tribulations that we've had at the Nielsen Automotive Group, and letting people learn from those experiences, our experiences, the direct experiences, and hopefully learning something along the way, creating awesome dialogues, meeting folks like yourself and your team who have just so much to add to the industry. And like I said, for me to always be learning, from you guys as well. So thank you. It really just started, like I said, as me saying, hey, I think this is fun to share. And then it did kind of, snowball effect or snowball into something, and will continue hopefully to snowball in a positive manner. So thank you first and foremost. And thank you to all the listeners and to all the people who have thought what I've had to say is worthwhile. Now to your question, the matter at hand. So how do we measure success, right? So I love it because it's a very subjective question, right?
Yeah.
And I think many marketers, dealers, so on and so forth can answer this or approach this from so many different angles, just like you started to, right? As you unpacked the question, is it about lead volume? Is it about conversion rates? Is it about overall traffic generated? Or is it about overall sales? And I think if I have to be as politically correct as possible, and I don't, but I am going to be in this instance because all those answers are correct answers, right? And so I don't want to say I'm dodging the question, but what I'm going to say is what I started doing at Nielsen, and this was towards the tail end of 2024 and now into 2025, I started looking at everything holistically. Okay. So you had mentioned how marketing gets lumped, or we'll call it siloed, okay, into here's your responsibility as a marketer, right? And I think this is what many marketers either then put on themselves as like, yes, this is my only role, or this is how dealers or management may understand the marketing function is just generate leads. And the more leads you get, the more at bats you'll have and the more vehicles you'll hopefully sell and or service. And I'm sorry, that's just not the case. It hasn't been the case for some years. And now I'm telling you, it's definitely not the case. And it's not how I'm approaching things. I'm approaching things holistically once again. And it's looking at overall growth within the Nielsen Automotive Group. Now, growth, you can say, well, doesn't that mean you're getting more and more and more, or you're doing more and more and more? And I'm telling you, no, that's actually not the case, because growth can be looked at from many different angles, once again, or through many different lenses. It could be growth and profitability. Okay. I could sell less cars this year than I did last year, but I could be more profitable based upon the fact that maybe I have less floor plan, right? So I'm not paying as much interest on the vehicles because we've moved through a lot of the inventory. I'm profitable there, even though I didn't sell more units. I could be more profitable because I've become smarter or more efficient with my advertising expenditures. I'm spending less money and maybe I'm selling more cars. So overall, my expenses are reduced on the advertising side of things, which means I'm more profitable when I sell my units. The fact of the matter is, growth to me is looking at it from a lens of profitability. And I will say this, and I think it's a great thing for marketers to do with their very own level of comfort. I will say this because I could see it as maybe they'll think they're overstepping their boundaries at a specific dealership or automotive group, but become involved in the operations and really learn about the different nuances and expenses within the operations, right? So they're usually responsible for an advertising expense. But yeah, if your dealer will let you know, or if your manager will let you know, become familiar with the floor plan expense and interest that's being paid there. Become familiar with personnel expense. Now, I'm not saying you're going to learn everyone's salary, but if you have a lump sum, an idea of, hey, this is what it costs to run the store, that's actually going to help you as a marketer do your job more effectively. Why? Because now you'll know, okay, I can't necessarily spend X, Y, and Z on all of this as much as I would like to. Or, hey, let's really dial in this, meaning specific tactic or a budget that's allocated to a specific tactic based upon the inventory that we have and the specific costs or costs that are associated with having that inventory on the ground and how long it sits on the ground and the interest expenses I'm paying on it. So, once again, I think just to come full circle, the way that I measure it is now from a holistic perspective or viewpoint, and it's about overall profitability. How do I get there, right? How do I get to profitability? And that, to me, if I can make our automotive group more profitable by influencing small things here and there, whether it's through marketing, whether it's through being more efficient with our marketing, whether it's ensuring that the marketing is being well handled and received by sales staff and management, that's going to help. And then also optimizing what we already have, right, within our digital ecosystem, meaning our first party data, and all these other things that the automotive group over the 40 plus years that it's been around has built, right, that brand equity. If we can leverage that better, it all is going to result in, hopefully, fingers crossed, profitability, better profitability, more profitability.
Yeah. So a couple things to double click on there. So the first one on that profitability concept, right? That is ultimately the overarching goal of the dealership, right? Of the business. So my question is, how, in your experience, what's the best way for teams to get together and have these types of conversations to integrate, in your instance, the digital marketing manager into the business strategy? Because that is a strategy conversation, right? Are we chasing volume? Are we chasing profitability? If profitability, what does that mean? And then what's our strategy to go execute on profitability? To your point, there's a lot of factors that can go into it, right? It depends on the inventory on the ground. It depends on supply, right? It depends on, obviously demand, but that's going to be there. So there's a lot of factors. It depends on interest rates. It depends on all these different factors. So to be effective, which is what your point was, I believe, what I pulled out at least was, to be the most effective possible, you have to know what the goal is, and then you have to be involved in developing, or at a minimum, understand the strategy for reaching that goal, because then you can go execute. So how would you advise, and again, maybe from your experience, teams getting together, whether it's somebody in your role, a GM or a dealer, how do you have that conversation? How do you make sure that everybody is on the same page so you can go execute at a high level?
Yeah, listen, this was actually advice from my current, manager, who I admire greatly. I view him as a second father, right? My work dad, Bill Snoffer, general manager of the Nielsen Automotive Group. Ultimately, one of the things that he said to me when I first started was, you don't get unless you ask. So I think, as simple as it is, right, and not to kind of boil it down to something so arbitrary as that, you say, how do you do it? You have to ask for it, right? And then from there, if they give you resistance, which they really shouldn't, right? Because I think any savvy dealer at this point in time understands that the marketing is truly the lifeblood of the operation, right? Without opportunities for sales and or for service, your business will crumble. It won't do as well as it's normally going to do. And of course, there's things that go into that that aren't even the true marketing side of it, but websites and all of your digital properties. So, your Google business listings and your social outlets and all these different things that go into your dealership's digital presence, right? That's usually overseen by someone in marketing, a marketing manager. And so reality check is, hey, these are fundamentals that are really, really crucial to the business, your business in general. And if I was in a position where I was a dealer, I would want to know every single thing that marketing guy was doing then, and all of the nuances of marketing as far as all the digital properties we have, how they work in our digital ecosystem, all of the analytics that are going on behind the scenes, how he or she, for that matter, is leveraging analytics, right? And utilizing it to inform business decisions and optimize campaigns, and ultimately positively impact my bottom line, which goes back to profitability. So when all is said and done, ask for it, you have to put together a structure. I would say these things, it's not a one and done, hey, let's have our meeting and then great, we have a direction. This is how we're going to achieve it, and then never talk about it again. No, I would think that these are things that, at a minimum, you should do on a quarterly basis, right? Everyone should get together, whether it's key stakeholders or you end up bringing managers in from different dealerships. The things that I would recommend would be have all the budgets and everything, ready to go, be transparent as possible with your own teammates. I mean, listen, if you can't do that, then you should probably reconsider what you're doing in the role, at least, right? So have all the budgets together. Usually have a CFO or a sales manager or general sales manager, whatever it is, have together all of the sales numbers, right? So vehicles sold, so on and so forth. We at Nielsen haven't gotten as granular as including service, which I think is an opportunity for us, but we're looking at it strictly from a sales perspective. So ultimately, someone who has all the sales numbers, right? The advertising budget, so all the advertising numbers, your expenses, right? What does that all look like as far as, hey, here's the nut at the dealership. This is what we need to do to break even. And then, this is how we can talk about attacking the profitability conversation. And then your management team, or, in our instance, we have one general manager who oversees all 14 stores, and then our dealer, Mr. Eric Nielsen. But the fact of the matter is, depending on your structure at the dealership out there, for whoever's listening, have those key stakeholders involved, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's their wallet that's being impacted, And so once again, you don't get unless you ask. So ask and say, here's why. Because I guarantee you, and this is if I'm role playing as this person at this dealership, we're missing opportunities to enhance our volume as far as sales, the number of vehicles that we service. We're probably missing opportunities or with leads or just generated ideas or opportunities that are out there. We're not converting them to the rate that we'd be looking for. We're probably spending too much money at some of the dealerships, right? And can that dealership actually bear that cost, right? Or is there a smarter way, perhaps if we're looking at it from a group perspective, to have a group buy in place where all dealerships can benefit, and then this store, which can't bear the brunt of this expense, actually can indirectly benefit, and that's how we're kind of approaching it. But how do you do it? Just ask, guys. I mean, the worst thing you can do is sit there and think that, hey, everything's okay. I'm not going to talk about it because it doesn't matter to them. Well, it should, and so the way that you get it to matter to them is you ask and you say, here's something I'm thinking about, which I believe can benefit your business. So.
No, that's great. That's a great perspective, and just kind of forcing the conversation and inserting yourself in the conversation if it's not coming to you, right? So somebody's got to initiate it. Maybe it's the dealer, the GM, the sales manager, and maybe it's you, right? But you need to have the conversation. That's a great perspective. I definitely appreciate it. Another topic I want to get your thoughts on. It's something that I honestly personally think about pretty frequently, is the concept of creating demand versus capturing demand, right? And in my opinion, you need both, right? And one of my favorite examples in the automotive retail world, and this is going back, it's been quite a few years, but it's a great example that I loved. And it was somebody from Facebook was actually talking to a group that I was a part of, and they were sharing this example about how, they were presenting to a group of dealers, and they were showing how their performance was on Facebook using advertising there. Mm-hmm. And the dealers were pushing back saying, well, we didn't get, look, there's no leads coming from Facebook. There's just, we're getting nothing, no traffic, no leads. It's just, we're spending a bunch of money and not seeing anything. So he had this chart, right? And he had this graph, and it showed pretty flat activity. It showed spend kind of, ticking up a little bit, and he's like, okay, well, let me layer over this other chart. And so he puts another line on there, and it's leads that come from the traffic source of Google, right? So he shows organic search traffic, and it's through the roof, right? So then as you spend more on one platform, right, in Facebook, then you're basically creating the demand there. And then, people go to Google to interact and find information. So then you're capturing the demand there. So it's really two parts. But I think that's a pretty simple example of how to execute on that. But how do you think about that idea of creating demand versus capturing demand from somebody who's been doing digital marketing for a long time in this space?
Yeah, simple yet effective example. So that's a really good one to share. And I think that is something now, and I will die on this hill talking about this. I think as we went into Q4 of 2024, I was tasked with finding efficiencies. Let's just call it that from an
Sure.
advertising perspective, and going through some pretty heavy budget cuts because the business was just not shaping up to be, what it had been 2 years ago, and what they say about the auto industry, right, is when it's good, it's really good. When it's bad, oh boy, hang on tight. And so, we had this kind of shift, right, to dichotomy, or the dichotomy there. We did really well 2 years ago. Last year wasn't so great. So now we're like, hey, how do we kind of, fix the situation or right the ship? And right now it's a really, really big ship. So it does take time to steer and turn. So the fact of the matter is, though, at the end of 2024, when we went through a lot of these budget cuts to find the efficiencies, one of the things that I reflected on was, what can we do better, meaning the automotive group and myself, to leverage the messaging created on a tier one and tier two level from the brands that we represent, right? So from the
Right.
OEM perspective,
Yep.
how do we mitigate or eliminate, for that matter, the expenditure that our respective dealerships would have been spending to essentially create the same demand that the OEM should have? Now, I'm not saying it happened in all instances, because some OEMs have very little or very weak tier one and tier two strategies. Others have very robust strategies. And then you hope that you can, of course, leverage that and capture the demand. So setting the table there, setting the scene, what I am a big advocate of now at this point in time is really, unless it's the Nielsen Automotive Group, meaning a Nielsen Automotive Group tier two regional message. And we have the luxury of doing that as an automotive group with all locations in New Jersey, 12 different brands, representing different price points, different shoppers, all basically in a consolidated or singular market, if you will. I have started leveraging tier two Nielsen Automotive Group messaging, right? Promoting that message. This coincided with the whole group rebrand that we did. This was another big project of mine, basically started back in 2023. Now it's finally come to fruition. So group uniformity, the Nielsen Automotive Group umbrella, right? And having all of those respective brands underneath that. And there's some fun stuff we're doing there. But a lot of the messaging, right? We've found efficiencies at the individual child level. We've saved money at the individual child dealership level. We've reallocated a little bit of that money to now have a group buy for Nielsen Automotive Group, creating Nielsen Automotive Group intent, right? People that are shopping for specific vehicles now thinking, hey, I need a car, I need to service a car. That becomes synonymous with Nielsen, right? I need to go with Nielsen. The fact of the matter is, because we've found those efficiencies and reinvested on the group level, we're seeing better results, believe it or not, with less money in the specific market. So that is something that we've done where it's creating demand, or capturing, I guess, a little bit of both, I should say, right? It's capturing demand that's generated from an OEM level, meaning tier one and whatever tier two regional advertising or advertising an OEM may be doing. We have our own regional advertising going on because we learned at the end of 2024, and as much as I hate to say it, that you can't rely on the OEM. I think you had a lot of OEMs that pulled back on their advertising. There weren't rebates and incentives that were attractive for a consumer out in the market. So it was like, hey, how do we take this narrative and make our own, right? Like, how do we take this and run with it? So that's one of the things. So, but when all is said and done, and I've said this on some other, speaking occasions that I've been, blessed to be on, but marketers need to understand the swim lanes and I hate that word. I mean, it's I think kind of antiquated. A lot of people have always said swim lanes, and it's the only thing I can think of right now. But let tier one, let tier two generate the intent, okay? And you as a dealer, if you really want to get the most bang for your buck, okay, what I implore you to focus on at this point in time are two very low funnel, kind of high intent metric or avenues, okay? If an OEM is now ramping up, which we see a lot of them do, and a lot of them are focusing on conquest, okay, instead of focusing on their customers that they've had from the past, all of a sudden, especially given the tariff conversation and all these things, OEMs decided to all of a sudden start conquesting the absolute living out of the competitors, right? So I shouldn't be spending money to go and conquest competitors because it's just going to be an inefficient or unwise spend of mine, the dealer spend. So what I'm going to do though is I'm going to throttle up my SEM. Okay. I'm going to throttle up my SEO. And ultimately what that will allow me to do is capture any and all intent that's created from the OEM on that tier one, tier two level, as well as dominate search results on Google, on Bing, even now leveraging AI on ChatGPT and some of these other places that people are going to ultimately look for information, right? I call it becoming a digital land baron. The fact of the matter is with Nielsen, and this is how we're approaching it, I have 14 dealerships, meaning 14 digital web properties that if done right, can have show up when someone searches for a query. What that does in my world is it makes Nielsen a winner. Why? Because it's the only option that a person has to click on when they're on Google, right? If they're looking in our market. So for me, this is why, once again, when we talk about it holistically, it's more so, yes, we still need to answer the customer's query by giving them the most relevant search result, but it's also about quantity, right? And if people are searching because there's intent created from tier one and tier two, our job just needs to be to capture that intent. It's going to be the best spend or the best use of your money that you can ever do as a marketer, as a dealer. And then it's about how do you push the competition to oblivion? And the point is, as cynical as it may sound, my goal is to be that digital land baron and to push all of my competitors off of page one. And if I push them all off of page one, guess what? They will get no traffic to their websites because people don't interact with anything that's not on page one of Google, for that matter, as well as other search engines. So I think it's a long-winded way to ultimately say my idea or what we've been doing at Nielsen, unless it's Nielsen specific, is just purely leverage whatever OEM marketing is out there and just capture any of the intent that may be created from that high-level marketing through low funnel, high intent initiatives. And it's primarily search engine marketing, throttling those budgets up, pulling from other avenues that you may have relied upon in the past, and then a fundamental in SEO. Just, yes, it costs some money and it's not necessarily a immediate return or immediate gratification for all the millennials out there, but it's something that now is a fundamental that you see as consumer shopping behavior changes, as artificial intelligence evolves and becomes more relevant and prevalent in the consumer journey. These are really the two things you need to win, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and that leads to, this other kind of concept around demand that I think of it as like damming the demand, right? So there's this demand, there's a river, right? And it's flowing and there's all these customers that are interested in something. And in our example, there's usually about 5 outlets that they can go to, right? If they want to buy a Jeep Wrangler, right? They can come to you or one of your stores, right? They can go. There's probably a couple other places they can go to. So there's all this demand. There's this river, and maybe they're a little higher funnel. Maybe they don't know it's a Wrangler, right? But in most cases, by the time they get to your site, they have an idea of what vehicle they're looking for. So there's this river, and you have this dam, and there's 5 outlets. So how do you block off the other 4 outlets, right? How do you make sure that all that demand starts coming to you, or if you need to change the direction? And I think you guys are in a great spot, and there's a lot of other dealers out there like you that have multiple brands, right? So I think about this, and especially you mentioned the tariffs, and it kind of popped into my head where, as we start to move forward into the year, and we'll see when all this impact really hits, if it does, but as we start to move forward into the year, there's still going to be demand for vehicles, right? People are going to want and need to buy cars. Now there's potentially an opportunity to kind of divert that demand to some of maybe your models, right? And whether that's, the original demand was for manufacturers that you sell or not, you have a set of manufacturers. So how do you take maybe some vehicles that are going to end up being more expensive to the consumer and take the demand for those and divert them to you? I think it's an interesting concept as we think about, these tariffs that have gone into effect. And again, it's going to be a little time before we start to see any impacts, but curious what your thoughts are there on kind of damming that demand and diverting it to you.
Yeah, damned if you do, damned if you don't. No, I'm just saying, I like it. I like the thought process there because I do believe that's what dealers will have to do, right? But we're not necessarily going to be calling it conquesting, because if you call it conquesting, all of a sudden it's a, high expense, low return,
Right.
kind of initiative. So what that means when all is said and done, Greg, is that, this kind of goes back to what we had just discussed with the two things that I think dealers need to really focus on, right? So
Sure.
it's low funnel, high intent. One of them you can be way more aggressive with, which is the SEM side of things. The whole idea is, right, when people are searching, okay, their search usually starts with things that are relevant to their lifestyle or a stage in their life that they're in, right? You may have mothers who are looking for, what are the best SUVs for families in XYZ state. You may have people who are looking for what are the best deals on trucks in, New Jersey. Let's just use, my state as an example here. In order to divert or dam the demand, you actually need to go a little further upstream. And I didn't actually mean to use that, right? That analogy upstream, but that's the case. And that's why then when you switch to the SEO side of things, it's really a time now for dealers to, one, better understand the consumer journey and the questions that consumers are asking. Now, this is all readily available information. All dealers have to do is they can leverage, Google and simply type in, what are the top 10 asked questions about X, Y, and Z brand or the car buying process, or, you can use any sort of query there to
Sure.
learn what consumers are truly interested in. You then need to provide the answers to those consumers. And then from there, once you have you're a little further upstream, you've identified your plot of land that you're going to start building this dam, and then your own little reservoir and how you're going to, kind of manipulate that there. Then you can start having it where you'll start having those little offshoots that then maintain those people that you've now gotten into your little reservoir or dammed area to your respective brands or, your dealership websites, so on and so forth. So I think when all is said and done, it's about, once again, I've mentioned holistically a lot of times. I've looked at holistically or mentioned holistically from how we're looking at things at the Nielsen Automotive Group, meaning overall profitability and what growth looks like, right? But I think from a marketing perspective, you also need to look at that holistically. We are always vying, meaning marketers, dealers, we're always vying for that lowest funnel, highest intent shopper. And I don't know the new numbers. I think it used to be at any point in time, like out of the whole entire population, it was maybe 2 or 3% of people are actually in the market for a vehicle at any given point in time. That was the entire population. Okay. Imagine now you dissect that down to the people that are in the market in your specific geography for your specific brand. We're all probably competing for like 0.02% of people. And we're throwing all of this money at that to try to capture that one person, at any given point in time. And if you look at it from that perspective, is that the smartest way to spend our money? No, I think the smartest way to spend our money right now is those two initiatives I discussed, where you can take advantage of intent created by an OEM from tier 1 or tier 2. SEO, start building a strong foundation, start building your dam a little further upstream, right, from the civilization. And the fact of the matter is, utilizing your first party data, and already leveraging what you have as a dealer to kind of, expand, grow, or expound upon that. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where we have probably hundreds of thousands of people in our database. And granted, given the size of a dealership and how long it's been in operation, so on and so forth. But, if you really kind of reflected on it, are we optimizing that data to the best of our ability? And I mean, even I would say, I think we're doing a pretty good job, but no, to the best of my ability, no, I think I can always do better. So that's how
Yeah.
I would answer that question. So it's just
No,
think a little different about it. Think outside the box, start a little higher upstream.
yeah, no, that's great. So talk to me more. Okay, you mentioned first party data, right, and how you're leveraging it. It's I don't know. I hear there's certain words that you hear, and it's like, oh, I've heard that 17 million times, right? But when you say first party data and you say leveraging first party data, tell me more about what you mean, right?
Yeah.
And to your point, you have 14 stores, you have a large customer database, you have a lot of data points from a lot of different places, right? You have your DMS, you have your CRM, you have your websites, you have all these different places that you have data potentially siloed for some dealers. I think you guys do a good job consolidating a lot of it. But talk more about what you mean by first party data and then how you leverage it.
Yeah. So ultimately, first party data just being dealership data. It's data that we own. To your point, it's data in our CRM, it's data in our DMS. Could be sales customers, could be service customers, could be service customers who never bought from us. It could be sales customers who never served service with us. So the fact of the matter is there's, like you said, hundreds of thousands of data points there. And let's just say for, maybe a beginner level dealer out there, a person, a customer record, a prospect is a data point in your CRM or DMS that would be constituted or considered as your first party data. It's data that you own. That obviously can grow over time, right? As you get more prospects through your marketing efforts and people come onto your website and convert, they're then put into that bucket, and ultimately they become now your first party data. So leveraging it, I think it was probably, and correct me on the exact timeline, but ultimately I believe 2024 kind of became a really big year for that focus, where everyone was talking about first party data, cleanliness of said data, right? If your data is not clean, meaning if you have incomplete customer records, or if you have bad phone numbers or bad addresses, bad email addresses, incomplete customer profile information, meaning like you have a vehicle in the system that they sold, however many eons ago, or a person's deceased. It's all about cleanliness of the data, because that's going to help you activate your marketing to a higher or more efficient and stronger level. And
Yep.
why I mentioned that, as far as first party data, cleanliness of data, and then how you are activating it or could activate it, is because at that point in time, the corporations that we rely on to advertise, such as Alphabet with Google and YouTube and Meta with Instagram and Facebook, a lot of that became, you had to upload your own customer lists because of privacy issues and all of the things that they were navigating. They no longer enabled you to see, essentially the consumer that they were marketing to on your behalf, or who that customer was. So it was, hey, let's upload our consumer lists and then trust them and their algorithms to go out and find like consumers, right? People
Right.
who are showing a similar propensity or similar patterns as far as engagement, and that might have a higher propensity to purchase in the next 30, 60, 90 days, and kind of let them build out the campaigns and trust that then that they were marketing to those people. So that's first party data. And from there, it more so became, okay, now that we understand it better, now that we know it's clean, right? We have processes in place to clean the data. How are we better going to activate it? And I think to your point, you say some dealers have that data siloed, some have it consolidated. Others have it a little bit of both, that it's, one might be in a silo and one's consolidated and they want to kind of mold it or mesh it all together. Then I think that's where the next buzzword kind of came into play, which was, customer data platforms, CDP.
Yeah.
And ultimately what that did was give dealers the opportunity to finally see everything, right? All in one place. And I think I'm going to stop there because I don't know if there's more questions around that, but that's essentially what came out of that was CDP and how you can leverage that better because that has everything in one spot. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's take that to the next level, if you don't mind, because, then, so you have all the data, right? You have it clean, you have it in one place, you have it kind of all consolidated, but then to do something with it, right? To make it actionable, to give somebody like you, tools to actually take all that and do something. I mean, there's really, I think, and maybe you have a different perspective, 3 kind of steps, right? You have targeting, so creating an audience, right? You have messaging, so what do I need to say to that person or that group of people? And then I think you also have sales tools, right? So how do you connect the marketing message to basically the in-store experience, right? How do you provide tools to the salesperson to educate them on what's already been said to the customer and help them close the deal faster? So with those 3 things, targeting, messaging, and sales, I think that's sort of the next big leap, at least from my perspective. And I'm curious what your perspective is, because to actually act on that data is different than having the data.
Yeah, no, I think actionability or making your data actionable is key. I think there's a lot of players out in the space who, whether, on their iteration or new iteration of their CDP or whatever they're calling it, at one point in time, and the vendor will remain unnamed because I don't need to do that. But, it was one of the NADAs. Someone was very excited to show me their version of a CDP. And I sat down and very impressive. But the question I said to them was, well, how do I make it actionable? How do I take all this and then build out campaigns? And, why not this, and this? And I will tell you, the person was perplexed. And this person was much smarter than I can tell you that, because they were a chief technology officer or whatever, someone who can build things, unbelievable things. But, that was foreign to them. And so I think the key with CDPs now is that you need to make them actionable, and you need to make them actionable through the 3 avenues that you had so beautifully outlined. Because I would agree with you there. I think first and foremost, it's better understanding the data you have. So once again, your first party data, better understanding your consumer profiles, right? You can glean a lot of that through leveraging a CDP. You can understand a consumer's journey much better. You can understand the consumer much better, right? And this can help inform other marketing decisions and kind of avenues that you may also look into for advertising. You can look at everything in a CDP and say, yeah, that either confirms my thought process that I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, or no, you know what, this actually proves a perfect kind of point, or, why I wouldn't want to invest in this, and this, because I'm seeing that in the CDP, that's not relevant to our consumer. And that varies by OEM, that varies by geography, that varies by seasonality. I mean, it's really quite incredible what you can glean from that. So, I think that ties back to your targeting, because it's a better understanding of the data in general. Okay. Targeting and segmenting, I'll call those the same. It's funny. Sure. I have my list here as well. And that was one of the things that I said our CDP allows us to do is segment audiences better. From the segmenting, you then get better targeting, right? So it means that when you segment properly, you have clean data. The targeting is going to be more precise. The targeting is going to be spot on. Okay. As far as your messaging, I couldn't agree with you more there, because once you have the proper audience segmented and now targeted, it gives you the ability to better craft the message that goes out to that consumer. And this is not a all like one size fits all approach. You can segment. I mean, just think about dissecting as much or as little as you want out of your DMS and CRM, and then building out custom messaging to go to that specific consumer, right? So it's, it's the right person at the right place at the right time on the right device with the right message, right? And so the fact of the matter is the messaging becomes much more effective because you, once again, have better understand the consumer, where they're at in the purchase life cycle or in their ownership life cycle, whatever it may be. And then from there, you've already segmented them and targeted them correctly. So now you're going to send them the most relevant message, and you're going to do so on the platforms or outlets that would resonate with them. It could be through the email. It could be through SMS text messaging. It could be through just targeting them on Google, remarketing. It could be through leveraging YouTube and different videos. It could be on social channels. Essentially, what you've done is you've just pulled this really enhanced list, right? This consumer list that's on steroids. And now you're better able to activate it. And then the last bit, sales tools. Okay. And this is something we leverage here. And I'm going to actually add one more after sales tools.
Okay. Yeah.
If you find it interesting, yes, please write it down. But so sales tools, what this enables us to do once you pull all of that information, okay, right? So now we've segmented, we've targeted, we have the message, and we deployed, okay? What you're able to get is a list of all those consumers, okay? You have all their contact information, so on and so forth. So what we should do as marketers is we should first and foremost make the sales staff, management, BDC, whoever it is, aware that these are the campaigns that we're launching. Okay. Now from there, you can take it a step further and you can say, here are the consumers that this campaign is going out to, right? And boom, here's the list. Now this is all digital, so you could email it to them and you could say, in 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, whatever it may be, if we don't see any engagement, okay, or if we do see engagement for that matter, because you'd be able to see all of these interactions in your CDP. And that's how crazy it gets. It's not just if they click on an email or respond to a text message. I mean, you can then see engagements out in the Alphabet ecosystem. So on Google and, on the Meta ecosystem that they clicked on a Facebook ad or an Instagram ad or so on and so forth. Because you could see all these touch points, which really can educate how a salesperson at this point now can follow up with a consumer. Right. And so that's where the sales tools, I think, become really effective. Is not only can you give them that physical list. I mean, you could print out a list, you could give it to them. You could also email it to them. You could email it to management for accountability purposes, which is the last thing I'm going to touch on. But then you could also have a email set up, just as daily tickler emails, if you will, where it would show that, hey, so-and-so, which is part of your campaign, okay, submitted a lead, let's say a month ago, didn't convert, has been back on your website in the past 24 hours. And then you have a concise list of who that person or those people are that you can send directly to the salesperson who was assigned to handle those customers. Now, every morning they can come in and they can say, all right, yeah, let me make sure I call, Jane Doe or John Smith because, hey, they had shown engagement. They're back on my website. And then it's up to us to create, kind of those talk tracks. I think you're going to ask me some specific questions about a very powerful tool. I know that you guys have it in your disposal, and now that we have it at our disposal. But, even that tool provides talk tracks, leveraging AI that make it the most relevant, once again, messaging for the consumer. And then, so the last bit I touched on, then I apologize just for speaking so long, but accountability. I think this is a massive, massive thing that not many people think about. I think it's something that I had discussed earlier on when we started the pilot for your Curator product. But the fact of the matter is accountability is big in our industry. And I find an opportunity for Nielsen to improve is holding our teams more accountable, holding myself more accountable, holding our managers more accountable, managers holding their salespeople more accountable, and all the way down, the hierarchy. The fact of the matter is this tool enables you, like I said, through some of those daily activities, like daily, let's call them tickler emails or coffee reports or whatever we want to call them. If that goes to a manager, now a manager can say, all right, at 11 a.m., I'm going to go walk over to, one of our salespeople's desk and say, here were the 5 consumers that you had assigned to you that have been back on our website. What happened? What happened with these consumers? Did you reach out to them? Did you call them? Did you text them? Did you email them? How many of them did you get into contact with? Did you set any appointments? What were some of the, points of pain points? What were some of the, pushback points, so on and so forth? It just enables you to build a better culture, which is an accountability culture.
Yeah.
And from that, you can create that or create from accountability learning opportunities, training opportunities. Show that you actually care, that you're going to sit down every day with a consumer or a salesperson, or a BDC manager, or even sales manager, and want to teach them, what you know about the industry. And perhaps maybe to come full circle, you'll learn something in the process, right? And so I think that's another key thing. So if we could open it up to 4: targeting, messaging, sales tools, accountability.
Yep. No, I love accountability. And I think you can even take it to just one step further. Your example of a sales manager walking over and talking to a salesperson is a great one. But then also you can leverage the CRM, right? So, okay, here were the 5 activities in the CRM. You closed out 2 of them, but I didn't see an email in there. Like help me understand what happened, right? Or, maybe it was a call and it was a voicemail and we have that voicemail recorded in the CRM and I can review that. And it was a pretty lame message, right? So then that's another coaching opportunity. So having that tie-in and then you're reinforcing that behavior too, right? Where it's like, hey, you know what? You need to use the CRM. And you have those conversations and it's a twofold conversation. You're reinforcing use of the CRM and tracking, but then also it's the coaching opportunity that you're talking about.
Absolutely. No. And I think that's key. I think, I can't speak for every dealer. And I think there's some dealers out there and dealerships who have a process just so dialed in. I love that for them. It's something, like I said, that's an opportunity for us. And I think a lot of it, once again, I love to kind of come full circle on a lot of these things. It's why you need to look at things holistically. Marketing often gets their feet held to the fire when sales are down or opportunities or leads are down. And I don't think people want to necessarily reflect on, well, actually, we have the same number of opportunities that we had month over month or year over year. But what happened? Oh, we got a new salesperson who we didn't train on our process, or, is not properly trained on how to do follow-up with consumers. Or, there was that one day where that BDC manager got really pissed off and just walked out and never came back. It's like, I don't think we put 2 and 2 together when we really should. And to your point, and it's beautiful that you had mentioned the activities and kind of the workflow in the CRM, because there are even alerts that can go out that say so-and-so didn't complete this. And now it definitely becomes the conversation, right? And make it productive. And for the dealers that have that process dialed in, I kudos to you guys and I applaud that. But for those that don't, no, this can definitely help out for sure.
Yeah, no, it's great. Well, Colin, I could talk to you probably all day.
Same, man. It's a lot of fun.
It is. I love picking your brain and hearing your thoughts on things. But I do want to be respectful of your time. What haven't we talked about that we should? Anything you want to touch on that we didn't have an opportunity to yet?
Ultimately, no, I think 2025 should be a year for dealers to really peel back everything. Look at everything, with a fine-tooth comb and look at it from an expenses side of thing with your advertising. Really dig into whatever vendor partners you may be working with and seeing truly what is getting you results and what's not. There's enough information out there and enough tools out there that can let you know what is working and what's not working and try some things, right? Listen, the third-party providers or, people are probably not going to appreciate this, but the fact of the matter is peel back some of that, peel back some of the expenditure on some of these platforms and see if it hurts. If it doesn't hurt you, then the fact of the matter is you've been spending the money inefficiently all along, and you can either save that and put it in the coffers and get a little more money in the kitty, or reinvest in other avenues. And then just look at the fundamentals once again. So peel back, try to find efficiencies and look at the fundamentals. Look where you've been deficient. Is your SEO strategy one that's capable of surviving in 2025 and beyond? I think a lot of us need to continue to kind of look into that and reflect on that and how AI is going to play into that. And then ultimately with search, those are the two things. I'll come back to that I would seriously focus on. Here we have notoriously, I shouldn't say notoriously, I guess it's notoriously. we have always been, and it's, I guess, how I've operated. And like I said, it's not always correct, right? We have run very, very lean with our marketing. It's one of the things that I've always tried to prided myself on is trying to get the most for the most efficient spend, right? So I guess the most for as little as we can. We navigated some really great years where that philosophy worked, okay? I think, like I said, last year was a year where we said, that's not really working anymore. We need to throttle up X, Y, and Z. And on the Nielsen front, it was our search engine marketing. We realized that our lunch was getting eaten by a lot of our competitors. And it's just because we did not have the visibility that we once had, given the overall budgets that were out in the market, right? Out in the ether of the internet. So that's when I started doing the self-reflection. And I said, I'm going to look at all of our sources. I'm going to see if there's overlap, right? What that overlap is. Can I remove one of these to prevent the overlap? I'm going to see if I can get more out of this expenditure by changing the philosophy. Instead of an individual store, I'm going to focus on group messaging and drive traffic to a group site, and then kind of understand that we'll let the traffic trickle down or flow out as it may, but then I've still realized savings at the individual dealerships. And then ultimately from there, we were also able to reallocate some of the monies while still realizing a savings. And this is what I'm saying to dealers. I believe you can do this too. In those more aggressive, kind of low funnel, high intent initiatives. So SEM, throttle up the SEM budgets, capture more of the intent that's out there now that the OEMs are putting more messaging out in the market. And that should be a pretty good recipe for success when you're hitting it from all fronts. So finding efficiencies, generating more opportunities in the process. What dealer wouldn't like that? And then ultimately, impacting their bottom line, in a positive manner. So thank you. Awesome stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, thank you, Colin. Colin Carrasquillo, Digital Marketing Manager at Nielsen Automotive Group. You're the man. I appreciate everything and the conversation.
Right back at you, Greg. Thank you.
All right, we'll talk again soon. Wow, what a great conversation. It was a long one. I hope you held on till the end because Colin had some great stuff throughout. I always appreciate talking with him. He's a bright guy, lots of great ideas. So I hope you got a lot of great takeaways from that as well. Before we hop off, don't forget you can watch or listen to all episodes of Connected on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify podcasts. And make sure to hit subscribe so you're notified every other week when new episodes are released. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.